I'm Bethany Russell, Director of the Mission Gait Academy. In this series, we'll highlight innovative technologies that can enhance skilled physical therapy. While we aren't affiliated with the companies featured, our aim is to inform, inspire, and open the door to new possibilities in rehabilitation. Welcome, Jimmy. Welcome, Kurt. Can you tell us a little more about your titles and the organization that you're representing?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. First of all, it's lovely to be here today. So my organization, Runeasi, representing Runeasi. I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders. We're four co-founders of Runeasi, and I'm the CEO. So I'm directing, the company at the moment. And my background is in biomechanics, specifically in running biomechanics, and apply to new technologies, wearable technologies.
And then I'm Jimmy Picard. Yeah, so I'm a new member to the team at Runeasi. I am the business development manager for the US, and I'm also a physical therapist and running coach in Roanoke, Virginia. So I've been a PT for over 10 years now and focus on working with runners. And yeah, I've been using Runeasi for the past 3 years, and then past couple months just started helping them out, working with them.
Well, we're super glad to have you both here. Thanks so much for joining me. So can you tell me a little more about the inspiration behind the tool that you've developed and how it's evolved since it started out?
Yeah, sure. So Ranisi started out as really as a research a prototype or a research grounded in research and academia. So I went over to Belgium University K11 to do my doctorate there, and the goal was really to find a way to get biomechanics outside of the laboratory, to do applied research to understand how runners are getting fatigued, why they're getting injured in their normal, habitual, what we call ecologically valid environment.
Yeah.
And we started off with the idea that let's validate existing wearable sensors on the market so that we can get as quickly out of the lab as possible to collect vast amounts of data. Because we saw the potential there. It was huge because we just started a collaboration with the machine learning and AI department, interdisciplinary research, which they were like, hey, give us data and we can help you get some deeper insights. And we're like, okay, we'll collect lots of data for you, but we need to make sure first that it's really quality data and it's not noisy or full of motion artifacts. And unfortunately, we hit quite a big roadblock because we purchased, I think, maybe 5 or 10 commercially available IMU sensors, wearable, these inertial measurement units, accelerometers, based technologies that allow you to capture biomechanics on the body. And we compared that to the motion capture lab, the biomechanics lab, the force plates, the Vicon motion capture system, and we were very disappointed because we noticed that the data was not, the output measurements were not anywhere near what we were seeing from the gold standard. And almost that kind of put a big spanner in the works for my PhD. And I spoke to my promoter, Benedict, and we were like, what are we going to do? And she said, well, we did order these off-the-shelf sensors. You're welcome to collect some more data and let's start from scratch. If you want, we can, process the signals right from the beginning. And I thought, okay, well, it sounds like quite a big step. I had no coding at that point. I had no coding background or programming or signal processing, all that stuff. But I was like, okay, we're gonna find a way to do this. And the next 2 years, we basically came up with our own algorithms and from the ground up validated the acceleration signals. We also put sensors all over the body. At that point, we had no idea where you should put a sensor on the body, where would you get meaningful information, what can be actually relevant and accurate. And through trial and error and a lot of experiments, and publications as well, we found that the sacrum or the pelvis was a very unique area. It gave us very high quality signals, so clean data in, meaning we could process biomechanical information also very accurately. We also quickly realized that the pelvis is such a key location, or the center of mass is such a key location for understanding how the body compensates to all kinds of things from injury to pathologies to fatigue to when you start getting tired and all those things. So I think, oh, this is a valuable proposition. And through our research, we collected. Then we managed to validate it in the lab and take it outside and start collecting the vast amounts of data that our machine learning colleagues wanted. And we spent hours on the track together, days, and from winters to summers. And through all those interactions with the two of us and our promoters, as well as all the feedback from the athletes in the studies and the PTs and the coaches that were interested in the data. They were like, "Hey, where can we get our hands on this data? Where can we buy it?" Well, it's just a research prototype, and then so the entrepreneurial spark kind of led us to spin it out of the university as a spin-off company, and launch our first service or running gait analysis module for PTs.
So yeah, you mentioned trying some other sensors, and I was curious. It sounds like the answer is going to be a lot is different from other wearables who are measuring run gait. But I'm curious to hear kind of a little more information about how it's different than smartwatches and other wearables that are assessing gait, maybe differently than yours.
There's a couple of factors that you have to consider. One is location on the body, and there's always going to be trade-offs. So your smartwatch is obviously on the wrist, and you can compute. Yeah, you can have the same sensor. I think our smartwatches today, they all have IMUs as well. They have the same type of sensor. One key fundamental difference is that the specs are different. So we specifically maximize the highest resolution possible, the highest sampling rate possible, to ensure that we capture the kinetic information. So that's where we, have different buckets of gait analysis. You have kinetics, you have kinematics, spatial temporal information, and we found that, well, that when you especially in a rehabilitation setting, what's really fundamentally missing is often the kinetics, the force related data. Movement can be analyzed in many ways. You have your trained eye to analyze that. You have video analysis. Even today, you have new technologies with AI that can also automatically do the kinematic analysis through your smartphone or your iPad. But what's fundamentally missing really is that there's the kinetic information. And if you try to do that from the wrist, you could be measuring a lot of accelerations. You could be shaking your hand a lot. But is that really related to the musculoskeletal loading and the shock attenuation on the body? No. You can maybe through lots and lots of data, you can maybe predict that somehow. We did a study like that. We submitted that to the AI conference where we could predict to a certain extent that can predict the loading on the lower limb from the watch. But it was, I think best case scenario was like 60%. So we're missing in a clinical sense, you're missing, a big portion of that. So and then you can put the sensor like, for example, on the chest or up on the upper back. So you might have seen other tracking companies, like in the team sports scenarios, they put the IMU between the shoulder blades. That also gives an indication of how many accelerations are being done. But what's fundamentally missing there, also from a kinetics perspective, is that the impact has already been absorbed by the body. The body acts as its own filtering system to protect the brain and spinal cord, as we know. And when you look at the signals, you don't see an actual impact this high up. So too high is also not good enough to get the impact measurements. And then if you go all the way down to the shoes or to for example, the ankles, we noticed that on the shoe level that you get a lot of noise in the data. You get, if you look at the signals, it looks like a signature that's completely, a careless signature, you could say, compared to a nice smooth sine wave that we would see at the sacrum. And of course, you can digitally remove a lot of these artifacts. But when you do that, you also start messing up with the spatial temporal information and the true information that you for the ground contacts and things like that. And that becomes inaccurate as well. We also tried on the tibia, which showed some good data initially. But to get that data, we had to really, really tight, like strap tight the sensor to the shin bone, which is of course also the location where a lot of runners have sensitive sensitivity from bone stress. And I think maybe 1 in 2 of our participants complained about their shins being sore after, after having the tibial accelerometer on there. And if we made it looser, then we saw again then the signals becoming very noisy. So we looked everywhere on the body in terms of what you can get, and we kept on ending up coming back to the pelvic area for simplicity, for accuracy, reliability, and meaningful metrics.
And then I understand, so once you decided, where exactly we should be measuring, you then chose 3 main factors to emphasize. So could you share a little more about those and why you chose them and why they're so important?
Yeah, sure. So we started off with maybe hundreds of metrics. If you've been in a biomechanics lab, you know that you have multiple degrees of freedom. You have kinematics, kinetics. You have so many sources of data, streams and streams and streams of data. Um, but that doesn't mean quantity equals quality. And especially when we wanted to, the goal in mind was to innovate something that can be used in a PT clinic that's fast, efficient, that's relevant. And we noticed very quickly that when you present so many data points of so many metrics, dozens, the clinician is overwhelmed, is like, okay, what do I do with it? And we noticed in our post analysis and our statistical analysis that 80 to 90% of the metrics were correlating with each other. So there was just redundancy over redundancy over redundancy. So we kind of our goal was to kind of strip it down to really funnel it down to really key components that reflect different areas of running gait that that are really independently essential or crucial markers, and then kind of find a way to bring them all together. And the one component is what we call dynamic stability, which is the pelvic stability while running. So when your foot hits the ground, you have to stabilize over that leg. Your pelvis have to maintain your control, pelvic control, lumbar pelvic control, and we're measuring those accelerations from side to side when you unipodal, when you're on that one leg to stabilize. And our research showed that when runners begin to fatigue, when they have a history of lower limb injury, like bone stress injuries or patellofemoral pain, they tend to have high instability of the pelvis as well. So it's not saying that's the cause or the effect of the injury itself, but we see that it manifests in the stability. So that's one component. It's a side to side component, and then we look at the vertical dimension as well. So in a force plate, you would be, for example, able to measure ground reaction forces. With our accelerometer on the sacrum, we look at the shock attenuation, so how that impact loading has been absorbed by the lower limb. We look at both the magnitude, so there's a peak associated to that impact, and then there's a timing component, so how long does it take for that impact shock to travel to the sacrum? And each one of these components, the magnitude and the duration, shed light on different aspects of how we're absorbing, dampening, coping with that impact. And especially from an active dampening perspective, are the muscles eccentrically working to slow down, to minimize that impact, or are the shocks really just shooting straight through the joints? Looking at ways to help minimize that impact, lower the impact from an overloading perspective. And when we get into some cases later, perhaps you'll see that there are definitely nuances and there's a framework associated, because higher impact is not always worse, because what we often see, if there's a compensation strategy or there's a previous injury, maybe the case or the patient had an ACL injury and recovered from that, and now they're getting back into their return to performance, return to sport, we see that there's an offloading behavior or protective mechanism. Then you would see in that scenario, an offloading behavior pattern from or lower impact on the injured side. So it doesn't mean you need to immediately try and load it up, but it means that you're identifying those imbalances. So I mentioned the dynamic stability, the vertical aspect, and then the third is the symmetry component, which is for every metric we have, we look at the left leg versus the right leg, and then we have normative data to understand what we typically see in healthy people, healthy runners, is the difference between left and right. And there's a lot of different paradigms about how do you interpret symmetry and what's normal, what's abnormal, what's excessive, what's not. And our stance on that is really that we first do it on a data-driven approach. We have thousands of runners of healthy runners, and we see like what is the typical norms for asymptomatic healthy, and for every metric it's different. For one, it might be that it's around the 10% mark, which is still healthy, and then for another metric it might be only 15% when we start to see that it gets really high. So we have that kind of approach, and then we summarize that into one symmetry score as well, and we have this layer on top that we summarize into a visualization for the end user, for the patient, for the athlete, because we know that too much data goes over their heads, and we also know that you want to give them a narrative that they understand what is the data it's telling them, and then what can they do about it. So, for example, if you say like, we identified that your instability is your weakest link, what are we going to do about it? Is specific exercises we can address to or prescribe to kind of address this specific weakest link that you have, and then they can connect the dots between the measurement and the actionable insight of what are they going to do, or how you're going to help them do that as well.
So just to like simplify, I guess what Kurt just said, the three metrics, like at their like basic explanation would be like how how much energy is wasted with that dynamic stability and side to side movement when the runner hits the ground. How hard are they hitting the ground with the impact load? And then how well are they absorbing that load with the impact duration? And then kind of wrap up in all those three, we see like symmetry left versus right. And then you can kind of go as deep into that as you want, which I'm sure we'll get into. But like the basics are, yeah, it's like how hard are they hitting the ground? How well do they absorb it? And then what's going on in that side to side plane?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear about this tool in action. Can you share a story of how this was used to help a client or a patient?
Sure. Yeah. So I can like uh, talk about myself because I thought this was interesting. When I first started using Runeasy as a like a PT and a user, I had been dealing with like a posterior tib tear that had been probably let's say a year and a half in the works, and it was like trying to get back to running, really struggling. And visually, like I kept doing like slow motion video because that's all I had at the time was like, what's happening? What can I do to fix this? Can't tell you how many videos I sent my PT buddies of like, what's wrong with my gait here? What am I doing? I've been doing all like the heavy load, the strength work, and it still hurts. And of course, some of this is going to be like time related. I'm just like waiting it out as this tendon heals. Um, but what was interesting was while nobody could see like asymmetry or visually see anything wrong with how I was running, when I got the belt and put the Runeasy belt on and started running on the treadmill and outside over ground, it was very apparent. I had this like 20% asymmetry in my stability on that left side, which was pretty huge, like 20% less stable on the left side, my injured side. But visually, you couldn't see that 20%. So it was really interesting. And then I was able to like look at that, say, this is not a strength capacity issue anymore. This is like a reactivity stability issue. So then it helped me kind of like revamp my personal rehab program to focus more on that reactive strength and the stability on that left side, which was great because I mean, I was doing some of that, but I was so like my bias is always like heavy strength. So I was like dead set on like that's the path forward. And it was now with the data, it was just very clear that like didn't need to get stronger.
I guess one question would be, what is the norm for, because you mentioned the normal symmetry is different for each metric. So what's considered normal for the stability side to side?
Yeah, so our dynamic stability for asymmetry, I'm just looking at the running at the moment. An instability, for example, of more than 14.1%, asymmetry that is considered very high. Elevated is already from 4.8, so around 5% onwards.
Okay.
and typical is below that around that 5% mark, and excellent stability is 2.1%. So you can see there it's very numerically driven. But when we do share it, I mean, I can show you here. We have the color coded benchmarks as well. So intuitively, it's much for quick reference pointing referencing in the clinic. You can say, okay, it's in the green zone. But if you go into the info knowledge, you can then see exactly what the different benchmarks are based on the normative data.
All right, yeah, so this was the run, and you can see this is that impact magnitude, how hard I'm hitting the ground over time. This is how well I'm absorbing the load over time. And you can see this is all color coded, so the green is good. So impact load, I'm good. Impact duration, I'm good. So all my impact stuff is great. Then when you look at my stability, you can see this huge gap between the right leg and the left leg. And then over here, now you're seeing that relative difference between the right leg and the left leg. So it's like this wasn't like a small thing, and it wasn't changing over time either. So it's pretty cool to see that in the data. I did longer runs. This was just one run I did with it. This was 2.5 minutes. But like the longer I went, that gap just kind of like grew, which was pretty crazy to see.
That's very cool. Yeah, and I think it's really important what you all have done in terms of condensing data, like you said, not showing every one of the hundreds of metrics that no doubt you are capturing accurately, because I've definitely seen that, and just kind of knowing, at least in the U.S., how the healthcare system is and how we don't have tons and tons of time. I think these smart tools, yeah, they're going to need to give us very efficient reporting so that we can translate it to our patients very quickly. So yeah, I just love what you all have done to make that so accessible and easy to use in the clinic.
Yeah, that's been one of my pet peeves in the clinic is like a runner shows up and they've had a gait analysis at some big gait lab and they show up with like a 10-page report that's just listing joint angles and all this stuff. And I asked the patient, I'm like, what does this mean to you? And they're like, I don't know. It doesn't mean anything to me. I recently got one sent to me and they're like, can you help interpret this? I'm like, this is just a bunch of jargon that's not gonna like, it's not applicable to you. I think that's what Run Easy does well is it's stripping it down, like you just said, to like, what are the things we really care about and what's going to help guide our treatment and help this and inform the patient to help them get like buy-in to help get buy-in to what we're going to do as far as our intervention goes.
The next question was, for those of us who may not be quite as familiar with the research, could you share more about how the sensor at the low back gives us information about how the foot is hitting the ground? Like, I'm very familiar with how steady state walking is initiated from the spine and the pelvis, but I'd love to understand this more in detail as it pertains to Run Gait.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, obviously, because we placed the sensor at the sacrum, we're measuring essentially, if you break it down to its raw components or fundamentals, is the 3D accelerations, and we're looking at that at up to 1,000 frames per second. And what does that mean when we actually look at the signal? Is that we see typically maybe it looks like a repeated sine wave, with the exception that there's two bumps. So you see repetitions in the signal. We also see that at certain moments we can break down the gait cycle, because you can see when it's crossing zero gravity upwards, zero gravity downwards, and we know that we can differentiate between the flight phases and the ground contact phases. So from there, our algorithms can also very like parse and separate what are the different phases of the gait cycle and key events. So from there we were able to validate against the force plate data and also the sacral marker data that we had from the Vicon force plate, the Vicon motion capture, when exactly these key events are happening and that they were happening on time to the nearest millisecond. And then from there, we could actually explore, okay, so now we know this is the ground contact phase. We know when the foot is hitting the ground, and we know when the toe off is happening. We're not measuring at that exact location on the foot, but we know when it's happening, which is really important. And from there, then we can extract, okay, what's happening during ground contact? Oh, we're seeing this impact wave, this peak happening. And then we can extract, okay, at what time is that happening, and how long does it take to travel there, and what is the magnitude? And then for the stability, like the side-to-side energy wastage, we can just look at the medial lateral signal, because the sensors got three axes, and the XYZ, and then the the one that is in the X direction, if I remember, is if you align it to the anatomical positioning of the body, it resembles the medial lateral signal. So there we can see what's happening in that direction as well, and what's happening maybe in the horizontal transverse plane. We also calculate some advanced metrics sometimes for specific research projects, and one would include like the braking shock attenuation, which is some interesting research coming out this year, publishing how that's related to running economy and how your how much energy you're spending is related to your braking and braking forces in a way, controlling your center of mass. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, except now I'm going to ask for spoilers with the research because I want to know if what I'm telling patients is accurate. Because I'm often, when I'm working with injured runners, I'm usually assessing their cadence, and if I find it to be below a certain threshold, I'll often speak to them, and I'll bring up braking force, and I'll talk about why I believe running at a low cadence and with very long steps is undesirable and probably not economical because they're wasting energy braking. How am I doing?
Yeah, from a braking perspective, that aligns very well. Sometimes it's not always the case for the vertical direction, but yeah, I think you're doing pretty well.
Great, great, good to know. Okay, so what I want to hear next, and Jimmy will be interested to hear your perspective on this too, is based on something I've seen in my career, is that a possible pitfall when we do have these wonderful, very advanced technologies is thinking that, okay, I have the technology, I put it on the patient, I use it, therefore my therapy is good already. And so I'd love to hear from you all about how physical therapists can avoid this pitfall. And yeah, maybe some specific suggestions for maximizing the benefit to the patient if someone does have your technology.
Yeah, so my thoughts here are that this is just a small, like a piece of the puzzle, right? The data you're getting is just a very small piece of the whole puzzle. And so you have to put it into context with how the patient's presenting in front of you, what's their story, what's the injury, what's their history with injury. Um, Combine that with your table and your physical assessment, like how do they move? Where are they weak? Where are they strong? Combine that with then the visual data that you're seeing. So like I'm often using this with slow motion video capture as well, so that I'm getting all the stuff that you're getting. I'm looking at their stride pattern. Are they overstriding? Are they heel striking? Then I'm combining that with the normal like spatial temporal metrics, your cadence, ground contact time, things like that. And then the last piece of the puzzle for me are like the three metrics that Runeasi is presenting. Um, so to me, it's like you can't like some people will come and like they just want me to like throw the strap on them and give them a gait assessment. To me, it's like it's kind of useless if we do that because I won't be able to interpret this properly. Because sometimes we see like even if the patient has an injury, sometimes they actually like run the data looks better on their injured side because they're protecting that area and they're offloading it. Or we see the opposite where the injured side looks way worse, right? So you have to like know the story and be able to put everything together to get like do the data justice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So it's like so it's a very small piece of the puzzle, but it's a very valuable piece of the puzzle because now I have a joke. I've said this to Kurt. I think like if I have to do a gait analysis now without Run Easy, I feel like naked. I'm like something's missing here. But it was funny because I didn't know that until I started using it. But now it's like the metrics that we're getting are completing the story in a way that's like helpful for me, like I was saying earlier, to now guide my treatment. It gives me more reasons for the exercises that I'm programming. Um, but it's like again, it's just a piece of the puzzle.
And we've talked a lot about running, but I'm curious, does your sensor also assess walking gait?
Yes, Ranisi also does walking gait as well. What we noticed there, so we focus mostly on the asymmetries. And the reason behind that is where we see things like dynamic stability, the impact loading being very, very correlated to walking gait speed. So it's just as a function. So there, when you start seeing, if you want to start identifying what is changing, when things are changing from a clinical perspective, especially from a progression point of view, if you're going to be doing side-by-side comparisons or pre-post analysis or return from post-operation, you have to standardize the speed very well. And that's why also we find that the asymmetry measures are much more independent and robust or independent, so to say, to walking gait speed. And a lot of our physiotherapists like to use it as a stress test to increasing speed. How does the patient respond? How does their symmetry respond when you crank up the speed? Because it's this maybe starting off really slow and they have to compensate a bit, and can they maintain that symmetry? Or if you make them walk up a slope, so you can set up the treadmill gradient up higher, and then sometimes you'll see that on the flats they have near perfect symmetry or within the norms of 2 to 5%. And the moment you put up that inclination, you start to see like a deviation between the left and the right, and that manifests and that kind of compounds over time in a fatiguing manner, where you start seeing the left and the right separate more and more. And that's something very helpful as a clinician to see, to kind of determine cutoff points where the patient is in their journey. If you're going to be recommending activities of daily living or exercises back at home, or how much you should be walking, how far, how many the miles and the distance or the duration. Like how long can they maintain the quality, the walking gait quality for before things start to fall apart in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jimmy, anything you wanted to add?
I would just say, yeah, so yeah, piggyback on that, like we're getting similar metrics. It's just a stripped down report. So I've used it recently with like a mountain biker who was actually coming back from shoulder surgery where she can't ride and she can't run because she was like in her sling and they didn't want her running, but she was walking a lot because like most endurance athletes were a little OCD and we want to keep moving. So she was walking a ton and trying to stay fit doing that, but was getting like hip pain and wanted me to just like watch her walk and do her an assessment. And I have it here, so I was just bringing it up while we were talking. But the metrics that we're seeing is like when I look at her dynamic stability, there was a huge difference there, left versus right. And again, it was just like a piece of the puzzle, a tool to show her, hey, like what you're feeling is like real. There's like something different happening there. So it validates their story or what they're experiencing. And then it gives me a in to say like, all right, let's work on some strength around that hip because of what we see here. Yeah.
And so I'm also curious about the use of AI within your system. Maybe you could, explain that to me, honestly, to me more because I'm very far from an AI expert and I just say AI and I barely even know what I'm saying with that. So I'm very curious to know its role in your technology, and then also curious to hear your perspectives on how you think AI is going to change our field.
So maybe I'll start and then Kurt, you jump in, because I know you got a lot more to say on this. So for me, like as a clinician primarily, when I create my report for the runner, it AI is like interpreting that data and it's saying like, here's the runner's weak link out of those three metrics. And then it's taking in all that data and it's saying, here's a recommendation. And it's like a paragraph of here's what we see, here's the things to work on. Sometimes that includes like a little verbal cue of like, hey, maybe you can try this kind of subtle cue with your running to see if it improves your metrics, which is cool because then we can try that and get live biofeedback and see what happens. And then more importantly to me, what I like about the AI generated statement here is like it is never like saying how bad the runner is running, their form is bad and they need to fix it and stuff like that. It's more like taking the data and saying, this is how the runner is running. Here are things you can do to support the way that you run. So it's more about like building capacity to tolerate the runner's form versus changing the runner's form. So it's cool the way that the Runeasi has created or trained their AI to like be, in my mind, like very optimistic. And it's very cool because I've been using it for 3 years. I don't think I've ever seen it spit out something that didn't make sense to me. Like Runease is great in that it allows you to edit the paragraph that it creates. But I've never had to edit it because I'm always like, this is exactly like what I'm seeing. So yeah, Kurt, you can pick up and like explain that in more details.
Yeah, or Jimmy did a great explanation there, and I think we like to joke in our team that we were starting with AI before it became trendy. Um, at least in a global way with with all the likes of OpenAI and ChatGPT and all those things like that. But we sought out right in the beginning to see how we can leverage AI or machine learning. And like I mentioned earlier, the data we were collecting and the collaboration in our team, half of our founding team are AI researchers and apply it to sports. So one of our co-founders is Professor Jesse Davis. He also applies it to football and soccer, and predicting, the value of different passes and what contributes to goals and things like that. Um, and so the understanding there was, if you have the right data, if you have a clean data set and you have enough of it, and you have the labels from physical therapists helping us to train these models, we were able to, over the last 10 years, accumulate a wealth of very high quality labeled data about about certain populations, certain patients, certain injuries, left versus was it on the involved leg, the left, right, um, and allowed us to build a framework around how do we give recommendations, like Jimmy was saying, and not in a way that we try to say you have to change everything about the form of the runner or the patient, but rather identify where the deficits are, where the capacity deficits are, and then provide a text that's in the language of both a PT and an end user, that's not too sophisticated, that's not this technical jargon, that breaks down why it's important what we see, what it is that we see, and how can you change it. So like really kind of use common language, layman's terms, to do it. As an example, if you I'm reading an example here. I think this is from my data. I'm working on my impact duration. So that's the component of how slow you or how quickly you're absorbing the impact, and that's something I'm working on at the moment because I'm coming off a calf and Achilles injury, and in our recommendation we say we're going to help you work on your efficiency to slow down these impact shocks as they travel through your legs, to support your grounded running style, because I don't really have I don't have a long flight time when I run. I'm more of a shuffler. And I never will be a gazelle type runner that has extreme bounciness and good reactivity in my gait. I come from a history of playing rugby in my youth, so I have extra body mass. So I'm more of what we call a grounded running style, and to support my grounded running style, I need to work on some reactivity exercises, as well as to improve my coordination and strengthening my quadriceps, shin muscles, dominant shock absorbing muscles. So it's about like how can we build the capacity around for me to support my goals. If I want to run a half marathon, I'm not going to try and completely radically change my running gait, but I want to make sure that I'm resilient and I can cope with the training loads that can help me achieve my half marathon goal. Um, and that's where our AI there really helps to kind of simplify the process. We also use machine learning in other elements in the pre-processing of the data. I'm not going to try to get too technical here today, but at various steps in the processing, because we're collecting data from potentially all environments, not just in the clinic, but we allow the runner to go and the patient to do an outdoor run. They can go in the trails. If they're a trail runner, we want them to yeah, uh, be tested in an area or in an environment that they typically run in that's comfortable for them. We also know that sometimes on a treadmill, when you're doing a gait analysis, your patients will have the white, like be affected by the white coat effect. They'll suddenly be running very upright, because they think they're being watched by you. The moment you turn around and they start drifting off, you see that they start running differently. Their form changes. And so when you allow them to go in their natural habitats, you get representative data, but that brings a lot of challenges to collecting accurate and reliable data, that you're detecting the steps properly. And there we use machine learning in multiple ways to kind of ensure that we're not missing any steps, that we're classifying what is a left step versus a right step, because the signals just look so much more variable than what you would typically see on a treadmill, and especially on uneven terrain or rocky terrain. Yeah, the signals look different, and we have to make sure that we still have very robust algorithms. And I think that's also what we believe sets us apart or differentiates us to other uh, companies in the space, is that we care about all the corner cases. We care about it being used in very diverse ways, so that it's as relevant as possible to the runner or the patient.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So I'm curious to hear what you all think about, and you've kind of already shared a lot of the value of that the technology adds to what you're already offering clients. But I'm curious. I think some PTs who are just used to using their eyes and ears, might say, oh, maybe I have everything I need already. So I'm curious to hear you all share more about what is the value of adding technology to gait analysis and gait rehabilitation over and above, the tools clinicians kind of come out of school with.
Yeah, I think first it's like I'm a very like anti or I don't use a lot of technology in my day-to-day life. I have like a dumb watch on. I when I run and I ride my bike often, I'm not used tracking everything. Um, so I'm not like this super tech nerd or anything like that. But yeah, so for me in the clinic, like I was saying earlier, it's like to me it's adding that buy-in factor because it's helping me explain things in a very easy way to the patient. Um, whereas before it's easy to like sit down, show a video, say, hey, you're heel striking and you're doing this. But then it's like you're having to like make the next leap and help explain why that matters to what they're dealing with, right? And so this kind of helps fill that little gap. It backs up what you're seeing visually, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times like what I hear, and I was like, I'm also like this with like gait assessments. I'm a firm believer that like we adopt the gait pattern that's like most efficient for us. And we can improve that by running more and doing focused training. But the way we run is the way we run. And so I think people get sometimes there's like the people who want all the data, and then there's the people who want like no data, and they just want to like keep it really, really simple. In my mind, I think Run Easy kind of fits in the middle really well because it's adding a layer without the complexity of getting all of the joint angles and the things that probably aren't important. Um, and I think it's it's like I was saying earlier, it's less about telling somebody that they're running poorly or these are all the things you're doing wrong with your running. And it's more like I said, this is the way you run. And now let's use this as a guide to pick our exercises much better and be more efficient with the routine that we're planning, whether it's like a healthy runner who just wants like some strength training advice, or it's an injured athlete that's dealing with the injury.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, to me, it's very well said. Maybe if I can add to that, we see kind of two buckets of adding value, at least in the clinical reasoning process of the PT. One is cementing their hypotheses or their kind of clinical reasoning. And I say cementing in the way that sometimes that you have a hunch that there's a connection or that this is where the deficit is. But it's not always clear, and then we trust our hunches most of the time. But when you have the data there to support you, it does provide a lot of reassurance and peace of mind. And we've noticed that when, for example, a PT then has been using Runeasy for a long time, and then for whatever reason couldn't use it for a week or something like that, they really feel like, okay, not that they're completely dependent on it, but they miss that element of just like closing the loop and that puzzle piece in it as part of their clinical reasoning. And then on the other side of the coin, is when you have your clinical reasoning theory hypotheses and then the data shows you something else or contrasting to it. And there's two ways to respond to that. Either you're like, oh, I don't trust the data. It's not saying what I want to say, see. It's not it's showing what I see. Or you say like, oh wait, maybe it's picking up something that I just missed. And most of the time, or if not always, that's the case. It's just about kind of again closing the loop on and being a puzzle piece into saying like, okay, just challenge my hypotheses a bit, allow me to kind of yeah allow a different perspective in the room. You can say it's from a data perspective, of course, um, and then use that to kind of build a more solid story or narrative towards the patient.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, it's giving you objective data to come back to support what you're doing. So, like as you were saying that, it reminded me of I had a post-op ACL case recently that was really interesting, and she had been 11 months post-op, returned to sport at 9 months, was really struggling with getting back to, she's a collegiate lacrosse player, really struggling to get back to any sort of like competency on the field, was pulling herself out of practice. Her mom booked her an appointment for a gait analysis, and I was like, I don't think this is what we need to do, but she wanted to do it. We did her gait analysis with Run Easy, and it was beautiful. Like everything was green, symmetry was perfect. So that challenged my body. Like I was prepared, I was like expecting it to show some huge asymmetry based on like her subjective and how she was presenting. Um, then Run Easy now has like some jumping metrics where we can put the belt on and do hopping. So I did an explosive battery of tests, which is like a squat jump and a counter movement jump. So both bilateral, both with lots of rest where she gets to like reset and do that. We did that. And her scores are also amazing, perfect. And I'm like, this is wasn't expecting that either. Uh, so then to help like complete the puzzle, the last thing I did was a reactivity test, which was double leg hopping, but now you're just bouncing. You're hitting the ground and pretending like it's hot and you're popping right off. And we did that double leg and single leg. And so when I put her through these tests, everything fell apart. We saw this huge discrepancy, left versus right. The surgical side was just not ready and not prepared. The post-op side was not prepared for that reactive strength. And so it to me, it gave me like again a clear path forward. I'm saying this, we now know exactly what your weak link is. We know what's been missing in your rehab. And now I have baseline objective data to start with, and then to do my intervention and to come back and to show her, be like, look, this is where we started. This is where we're at now. And it's giving us like little stepping stones along the way.
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea of, having a tool that can challenge your assumptions, because I do think about that sometimes in the clinic about how, I have my methods and my go-tos and I don't know, you see one deviation and then I feel like I notice you start seeing it in a bunch of people that same week. And so there's things where I know, the imperfections of being a human and having biases and everything like that. So yeah, the idea of having something that can either corroborate my hunches or challenge me in a healthy way and very much to the benefit of the patient. Yeah, that's exciting to me. I would love to see that push our field forward. So
Yeah.
that's great. So the next thing I wanted to hear about, and I've kind of already picked up some of these from you along the way, which I've loved, is hearing about more about how your technology reinforces the sort of essential concepts within physical therapy, whether you do or don't have the device. So, I've thought it was really interesting hearing from you about not changing things in the runner if you don't have to, and just supporting, the runner's individual running pattern and just improving on that. And I've also heard a lot about, it's been very instructive to me about, the shock attenuation and how important it is for us to be able to effectively absorb that shock. But yeah, I would love to hear more from you both about, what concepts your technology reinforces.
Yeah, I could start here. I'd say um, it's like a very optimistic solution in my mind compared to other things I've seen on the out there where it's like you're getting labeled like things that just sound bad, like I'm trying to remember one I saw recently, like the it was something like heavy-footed overstrider or something. I'm like, don't label me something like that. I don't like because I don't like to label patients. And I'm very sensitive to how I talk to patients and want to like make them leave my office feeling better than when they came in. And that includes just like, and you know this as a therapist, it's like our tendency is always to like point out the negatives, right? It's like that's you want to sound smart and you want to show off how much you know, and so you're saying all the bad things. And I think some of the technology out there kind of reinforces that side. And it's not a, it's like it's just because you're trying to present data, right? But I think Run Easy is doing this in a much more optimistic way, where again, it's more supportive instead of pointing out flaws and things like that. And so it leaves it up to you, the clinician, to interpret it and to give your spiel to the patient in your verbiage and how you want to do it, versus, yeah, putting people in like specific buckets.
Oh, one concept that we use a lot, especially in our education as well, because we do educational courses, live courses as well, to bridge the gap between exercise therapy and gait analysis is on the specificity to overload continuum. You know, on the overload, you can have your building capacity is one thing. And on the other side of the spectrum is specificity. And for running, that means running and gait retraining as well, right? So on the one hand, our philosophy or like our basic hypothesis is that we don't try to change the runner's gait too much because we believe that they have like inherent most economical gait, and we want to support their running style. On the other hand, we do have a biofeedback gait retraining module, which is in context. If you imagine you have your patient running on or the runner running on the treadmill, and what they have then is the screen or the monitor in front of them, and they get the knowledge of their performance or the knowledge of their metrics in a visualization in the color coding spectrum. And you can then say, without trying to cue them, because there's one way you could do it is to say, okay, we want you to increase your cadence, or we want you to increase um, to decrease your ground contact time, or these type of things. You can do it like that, but sometimes we see that adherence is very difficult. Not everybody can respond. Instead of overcomplicating things, just say, look, this metric over here, this little puzzle piece here is the moment is in the red or in the orange. We would like you to get it in the green and play around, explore, have fun. In the next 2 minutes, I want you to just play around with your running gait, make some changes, and when you see it going towards the green, try to repeat that, and it's that form of that that's the control loop and the feedback, and there they can optimize their running gait perhaps by a few percentage points or to improve it through specificity. But we realize that that requires a lot of training, a lot of practice, um, and it's so individual that it's very hard to pinpoint exactly always which cue works, which cue you should be trying. We see, the response rate is not uniform across all patients or runners. So if you have a cue like increased cadence, that can work a lot of the time, but sometimes it has a net zero effect, and sometimes it has maybe a detrimental effect. In fact, again, it's what patients in front of you, what's their injury history. But what we really find is that biofeedback is quite powerful. Um, and what you can do is then, if they start to improve and get into the green, and they can hold it for a few minutes before they start going back into the red because they start to fatigue, is that during that you can also then take a video pre and post, and you can show them how they look kinematically different to it. Sometimes it's almost non-existent visually, then that's the thing, is
Yeah.
because you have a combination of all your joints doing 1% change here and there, and it's a synergistic thing, rather than like saying, okay, we just want you to try to run on the midfoot or try to make a gross change to your running style, which it's just it feels very unnatural to some patients as well. So there's a kind of concepts of paradigms that we're uncovering now, and trying to move the state of the practice forward as well, but leverage existing research and do it case by case as well, because we see that it's very individual.
Yeah, 'cause if I piggyback off of that with biofeedback, and um, if you're solely relying on the visual feedback of what, like, yeah, joint angles or what you're seeing, then that's all you're looking for is like, can I make a change there? Which you're missing a big piece of the puzzle, the layer of like what's happening, what is the body experiencing? What are the forces that the body is experiencing? And so it's adding that layer that can be important. And it what's great about Run Easy, it's not like it's this is an option. This isn't something that you have to do. This is your choice as a clinician to choose which route you take with the data. Um, Instead of like, yeah, it leaves it open to interpretation. So like I will use it occasionally, do biofeedback as a temporary solution. I explain this as a temporary way for us to unload a sensitive joint or a sensitive area. But the goal is like you just do this while we need to, and then forget about it when you're healthy, you know? And so other if we're yeah, when you over rely on like what you're visually seeing, I think it's harder for the patient to realize that this is a temporary thing. They think their form is bad and that it needs to change for them to get out of pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's I think more and more data coming out too about the individuality of gait patterns. I'm reading articles and finding that researchers have to specify their gait pattern was a little bit less unique than their fingerprint. But if we're comparing a gait pattern to a fingerprint, that's so individual.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because like I was trying to find the study that said that. Well, there was a study recently and that said, yeah, the conclusion was something like our gait, the individual gait is like a fingerprint. It's unique to that individual. And so making changes is very hard to do. And a lot of times, like I've seen clinicians get turned off by just the word gait analysis because they think that automatically means we're trying to manipulate somebody's gait, right? But that's not what it's about. It's more about, again, the pieces of the puzzle. It's completing like what is the body experiencing while we're running and how can we like see that in a concrete way and then just see what happens over time. Because we also don't know, like this could maybe the runner has always ran with this asymmetrical pattern, and even when they're healthy, we see that it's still there. But we don't know. Maybe that's just not, maybe we didn't complete rehab also. And it's like there's a missing component there. So it's just like all of this is very complicated. There's lots of pieces. This is a small part of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I love that. I love that you all are working or have worked so effectively to keep the optimism in it and keep the exploration in it. I just think that's like healthy movement and healing movement is very explorative. However that it is exploring, and that's what I want for my patients is to go out and just and move in the way that feels good to their body and explore movements that feel better and explore, oh, that movement felt worse. And I think that's, yeah, to me, that's the healthiest movement is it's exploring and it's also joyful. That's what I also hear in this is that you all have worked very, very hard to keep the joy in running. I think that's why I run. I'm guessing that's why most people run is because it brings us so much joy. And so I love the idea of just supporting runners and keeping the joy in running. So yeah, I just wanted to commend you all for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's part of our mission is to keep runners running, keep them running. And what that means is, yeah, obviously there's the injury component and keep them injury free and the overuse element. And we want to, yeah, to do that and keep them running longer, further, faster, or just but their whatever their goals are, even if it's twice a week, just not end up going back into that injury setback and switch the kind of the philosophy from treatment to preventative, and that there's a very big primary role for PTs in the prevention aspect as well, not just on the treatment side. And that's where we're shifting things as well. In the future, we're going to be rolling out a remote module where you can perform your running gait analyses or your run easy assessments, should I say. Yeah, you can send the belt and the sensor to your patient. They can have it, try it for a few sessions as they return back to running, and you can essentially do it from anywhere, and remotely. And you'll have our kind of end-to-end workflows to help you process the insights from the data and then to give them the feedback in an efficient way. And so I think that's one of the next steps going forward as well, is then to support the runners where they typically train, and that you can help them from wherever they are.
That's great. I love that. So we were speaking a little bit about research earlier too, and I'm curious: are there any particular studies that you all found particularly impactful that's relevant to running technology, running Gait, that you wanted to recommend that people read?
Well, I'm going to have a bias because I have my publications from my PhD that were prior to the founding of Runeasi. I think that's also what we're a bit different. We didn't set out to commercialize a running gait analysis tool or biomechanics tool from the beginning. It was the other, and then try validate it afterwards, which often it's most of the time like that, where you see a company say, okay, we need some validation. We first had our internal validation, and we got to a point where, oh, okay, there's a commercial aspect to it. So our paper, so one of my papers that I will refer to is one where we looked at an outdoor running protocol where we had a sample of bachelor students doing their sports science PT bachelor program, and they get thrown into this crazy physical program where they have to do all sports, and they have to, yeah, from gymnastics to running, and a lot of them end up with overuse injuries, especially bone stress and medial tibial stress syndrome, which is from a research perspective very very nice because you have a great sample and it's a year on year thing. And so we built on many years of data, and we grouped that together, and we could see that first of all we saw retrospectively that our some of our metrics like dynamic stability was explaining why, or it's a predictive factor why some runners had previously developed medial tibial stress syndrome. So retrospectively, so we could see there was a difference between groups. But I think maybe like we said a little bit earlier, the chicken or the egg scenario, was that dynamic stability there present before the injury? So was it like a risk factor for the injury, or because we had measured them after their injury, was it a compensation to their injury? So it's that chicken or the egg. So then we followed that up with a prospective study, and that happened already when I was outside of the university and founding Runeasi, but we had a follow-on PhD student that was collecting the data on another follow-up years, and then put it all together. And there we found prospectively that it was, yeah, also a risk factor towards lower limb stress, lower limb injuries, overuse injuries, medial tibial stress. So I think there's two papers there that can, yeah, already help to identify the link between injury and the metrics. I think that's the most important thing. What's going on now is we have a lot of independent universities specifically doing interventions on specific populations in a physical therapy sense, also gait retraining, and linking exercise therapy to it. So the research, I think we're only just scratching the surface or one layer of the onion in terms of what the applied research is going on at the moment, and that's all going on while there's thousands of actual cases being collected from our uneasy, yeah, user base or expert user base of PTs at the moment, and that's also helping us to learn. Yeah.
For me, looking at like gait analysis literature, like I recently took Rich Willie's course. Do you know Rich Willie?
Yeah, I
Have
know.
you
Yeah.
taken his course or any?
No,
No.
not yet.
So when he gets into like the biomechanics lecture on running, he presented this study as Cochrane et al. 2021, where it was like 121 national level coaches were asked to rank runners' economy and efficiency based on doing like a visual gait analysis, and none of them could rank them accurately. Like I think it was like 6% were able to rank like two or three in the appropriate like top five. But like no, but let's say like a lot of times I hear clinicians who try to rely on everything like their visual, what they see. And it's like this study just highlighted the fact that we can't really see this thing. We think somebody looks efficient or inefficient, but the body's unique. People run like you've seen some very elite runners run very fast with not a ton of injuries, and their form looks like uh in the it's not ideal, let's say. Trying to be optimistic here, not be negative. But you know what I'm saying? So I think that study for me was pretty interesting to just highlight, like, yeah, like we can't see these things. And so it's nice to have a tool that helps us gain some insight there.
Well, great. So where can people go to learn more about Runeasy, or if they want to request a demo, where can they find you all?
Yeah, so you could go to runeasy.ai and right on the front page there, you'll see like, yeah, book a demo. You could reach out to me or Kurt directly as well. Um, I'm on Instagram at Redefine Physio. And then, yeah, so those are probably the best places. Kurt.
Yeah, you can reach out to me via email if you want. It's kurt@runeasy.ai. And like Jimmy says, if you would like, we offer free one-on-one demos because we believe in the educational process. We like to share the science, the behind Runeasy, the applications, and we like to take our time to explain to the PT how it can be an added value for their practice and for their clinical reasoning, and also see it as from their business perspective as well, how and from a practice how it can fit in and how they can use it, especially if they're leaning towards cash-based services and things like that as well, that they can incorporate that as a part of their offering and to generate revenue for the practice and use it also as a marketing tool if they want to specialize as or be the go-to running specialist or running gait analysis specialist in their area, and how they can use Runeasy as a marketing tool to approach running clubs in the area to offer these specialized services and connect with running coaches, connect with running clubs and communities in the area. Feel free to reach out to us. We're always open for a chat and a conversation, and to be part of our growing network of PTs using Runeasy.
This video is part of a series on rehabilitation technology. We encourage you to view our other videos in this series and to share them as well. You can find them on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/missiongait. To stay up to date on our latest content, click the link in the corner to subscribe and be sure to like and share this video. If you enjoyed this content and found it helpful, please consider joining the mission or donating using the link below or using the donate button on our website, www.missiongait.org. We love providing this information for free to anyone using the YouTube platform, and it's all thanks to our generous donors and sponsors who truly see the value of this information. How about you?